Welcome to Spirit's Journey, coming to you live on Truth Frequency Radio and simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio. Your hosts are Patrick and Kathryn Andries.
Join us each week as we explore a wide range of metaphysical topics such as dreams, astrology, intuitive readings, and life purpose. You'll receive practical guidance so that you can live your most awesome life.
Learn more about what we do at intuitiveschool.com and connect with us on Facebook at Spirit's Journey Radio. Welcome to Spirit's Journey. We are coming to you on Truth Frequency Radio and simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio. You can also find us on iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and TalkStream Live. We're here in the Heartland, holding the energy for spiritual truth and awareness. I'm Patrick.
And I'm Kathryn. Welcome, everyone.
And today we're excited to have Sara Koron here with us. She is an acupuncturist. She has pursued her 4-year medical training at the National University of Natural Medicine in Portland, Oregon, receiving a Master's of Science in Oriental Medicine. She is designated as a diplomat in Oriental Medicine from the National Certification Commission for Acupuncture and Oriental Medicine, and is a licensed acupuncturist in Kansas and Missouri. Additionally, Sara has studied ecology and life sciences, earning a Bachelor's of Arts in Biology from the University of Kansas. She is a master beekeeper, has trained in metalsmithing and jewelry making. She is a percussionist and a banjist. So since 2010, Sara has been offering Chinese medicine services for the Kansas City community, operating in multidisciplinary settings as well as private practice. Sara found Chinese medicine, or rather it found her, while seeking a way to combine her passion for nature with the skillful precision honed through her creative art skills. Observing natural processes in the environment informs us of the dynamics of human life and disease. These unique strategies, along with gentleness and compassion, bring a creative approach to supporting the body's natural ability to heal itself. So welcome, Sara.
Thank you. Thanks for having me today.
Well, this is such perfect timing with everything going on in the world. I think we could all use some amazing healing remedies, and I know that that is your specialty. So let's just begin by hearing what you would describe Chinese medicine as.
Sure. Chinese medicine consists of multiple modalities. Most commonly, people think of acupuncture as the most well-known modality of Chinese medicine, and hence we're called licensed acupuncturists. But we also practice herbal medicine, massage, different bodywork techniques, nutritional support, so diet, medicinal prescribed diet, and exercise, which could be like Qigong, different movements that are focused on these energetic anatomy that we work with in the body. So just to expand a little bit on that the acupuncture may be actually using needles to stimulate these points that we use, but also could be acupressure, could be using a therapy called moxibustion, where we warm the points using an herbal prescription, but also nowadays there's different people using essential oils. There's many different ways to stimulate these acupuncture points, and that would all be lumped into acupuncture. And so that's what we do to help people feel better.
So one thing I'm familiar with the Chinese philosophy, because I am actually a Tai Chi practitioner and instructor, and so there's the yin-yang theory, and that plays into the Chinese medicine also. Could you describe that just a little bit for us?
Yeah, that's basically what it all could come down to. If we're looking at a person and the interaction of these physiological systems that we have, we're looking at the dynamics of yin and yang. And yin would be the more material, yang is the more moving, warming forces. So we look at the interplay between the yin and the yang, and we're looking specifically for imbalances in those two categories. That can get really complex. If you ever have looked into yin and yang theory, they become each other. It's the symbol of the Tai Chi that people are familiar with. where you've got the black with the little white dot and the white portion with the black dot. That's means that is a constant dynamic system that they can transmute into each other. So that movement also plays a role into how we approach medicine.
And so I love the Chinese system because it is actually an organizing theory of information, whereas the Western system is just like no organizing theory. But in your opinion, how would you describe the difference between the Chinese medicine system and Western medicine?
Sure. I mean, one of the main things is, I love this quote says that the same disease, different treatment, same treatment, different disease. And that's a paraphrased, translated Chinese quote, but from ancient texts. But it means that because we see someone with one condition, say they've got allergies, we're not just going to go through this list of, okay, they should take an antihistamine, they should do this, do that. We're actually going to look at their individual patterns. How does that allergy express to them, or whatever illness we're looking at? So that's one of my favorite ways to tell you, is that we treat people individually, and so there's not exactly a cookbook for this all these remedies. We have to go through and really observe and ask the patient how they feel.
Well, I love that, because it's just, this one size fits all model is just simply ridiculous and so simplistic. It misses the point, in my opinion. That's why Western medicine just usually can't help people with chronic conditions.
Yeah, and speaking of, to miss the point would be, we're looking at symptoms and how do you make someone feel better, but we're also looking for that point where things went wrong. What is the root of this, and how do we promote that balance so that the symptoms aren't coming back?
Yeah, it seems like too often in the Western approach, it's symptom suppression. That, you have a symptom for one thing, like, for example, one thing I'd heard with this coronavirus situation is that they're actually giving people things to lower their temperature. And, I have a background in biology and physics. So just looking at it from the biology standpoint, the fever is actually there to put the immune system in high gear. And so a lot of the processes of the immune system don't work as efficiently at the lower temperature. So when you have a temperature of 101 or 102, then it kicks everything into high gear. But it seems like in this country, and probably other places too, but just kind of the Western approach, it seems like, from what I've seen, there's so much emphasis on, your temperature normally isn't that high, so let's give you something to lower the temperature. But they're not even thinking about the idea that they're actually inhibiting the immune system's response. It's not going to be as effective if you lower the temperature, because that, it's got a high fever for a reason. I mean, except of course if you have like 105 or 106 degree temperature, where there could be some real damage. But I think anything up to around 103, 104 is actually safe generally. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, in my perspective, and I agree with you that we're spiking a fever, that all of these symptoms are a sign that our body is working on eliminating a pathogen or correcting whatever is the pathology there. So to depress those symptoms, we can only figure that then we're depressing our natural activities to promote that healing.
Well, since we were talking about kind of the Chinese philosophy, because we can get into some of these other specifics as we go along, but I wanted to touch on too, because we talked about the yin yang theory a little bit, but a lot of this, sometimes we talk about like the acupuncture meridians or the acupressure meridians. So can you describe for us a little bit about, like, what is the energetic aspect of the body?
Sure. I mean, we're looking to restore this flow is what acupuncturists are doing. And so that anatomy is different because we have a series of the 12 primary meridians, and that's where you locate those acupuncture points that have such great effect. So with those channels are carrying the chi, the blood, the fluids, and the nutrition to all of our tissues and our vital organs, and we want to make sure that it's like a system of rivers and tributaries, that all of these channels are then flowing and full of the energy and the material aspects that we need to survive.
Hmm.
Does that kind of get to your question there?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
So how do these get out of balance then? Like, what's really going on there when this energetic
Yeah.
system gets out of balance?
Well, we have in Chinese medicine a different understanding of that, but you can look at things from our external environment that are impacting us. That's where I talk about, we're watching what's happening in nature to help us understand what should be happening in the body. All of these symbologies that we use come from natural environmental uh, occurrences, and so that's then happening on a micro scale in the body. So we're looking then to maintain that flow and that communication between all of our vital organs through these channels. We would, if there happens to be trauma or a pathogen, or also from excess emotions and imbalance in too much worrying or extreme grief. That heartbreak is actually a physical condition where something is happening in the body that's not balanced.
And yeah, I was actually going to ask, we're evolving in the Western world to look at the mind-body connection. So I'm glad you brought up the idea of emotions, because I know we have found, in my own body, I've found how directly correlated my thoughts are to my health, my body, and what I'm feeling.
Sure. Yeah. And there's a physical response to those emotions, also to our activities or our diet. If we're overeating or just eating the wrong foods that aren't for us, that would create then perhaps a blockage or a deficiency in those little river channels that we're talking about. So we want to make sure that we're getting proper nutrition. We're not, overindulging, or I also believe with exercise there has to be a balance. We can get disease from sitting too much, from standing too much, from overworking, from sweating too much. So we have to really keep moderation in mind with our activities to promote this balance.
So I know there's probably going to be some people interested in trying out acupuncture to see if this is a good fit for them. So what would somebody look for if they were looking for an acupuncturist?
Yeah, I mean, if you're specifically seeking Chinese medicine, this medicine has evolved so much as it's become, westernized and come to the States, and now we've got different styles of acupuncture. But for Chinese medicine acupuncture, I just want people to know that there's a lot of different varieties of styles of practitioners out there. But I would recommend going to our national certification organization, and that is the nccaom.org. They have a find a practitioner link, and that's the best way to look in your area for somebody who has passed these exams, that has gone to a credentialed university for their training and is deemed safe to practice. That's important. And then, you also, of course, you want to maybe talk to the person, see if it's a good fit for you personally, because this is someone that you're allowing into your intimate space. You're working together on your health, and it's really important that you can make a connection with that individual.
Well, and I just want to give a shout out to Sara, because anybody who lives in the KC area, I've been receiving acupuncture for Sara for several years, and I keep going back to her because she is simply amazing. I feel so comfortable working with her. And so, Sara, at this point, why don't you tell people how they can get in touch with you? And then, as you said, there is so many changes evolving as since acupuncture came to the West. And describe to us your unique style and practice.
Sure, thank you, Kathryn. The best way to get to know more about me is going to be going to my website for my practice here in Kansas City, Kansas. That's sunriseacupuncturestudio.com, and maybe you guys can post a link or something, type that out. But acupuncture is spelled with one C. That's important to note because a lot of people like to double the C in there. Anyhow, sunriseacupuncturestudio.com gives all the details about my office, my location and services that I offer, as well as online booking and my contact info. So you can ask more questions there. I'd be happy to hear from you. A couple things that I think set me apart as a practitioner was, number one, my training is in classical Chinese medicine. What we mostly hear about now is traditional Chinese medicine. That's what has developed and is used in hospital settings in China. Most of their training programs are based on this traditional Chinese medicine, and I'm not disregarding that because it is very useful, but it uses more of a Western science model where this equals that. And being classically trained, it gives me access to a lot of tools of symbology to be able to take hints and help guide the treatment through the symbolism that I've learned. And again, back to observing nature. And then, well, what else to say? Classical Chinese medicine is a broader category. It also includes the spiritual aspect, which I think is critical. I can go through a long list of the differences, but I would encourage you to maybe research or ask me some questions too. But the classical Chinese medicine, seeing the whole picture of the mind, body, and the spirit. So that's one thing that's unique about my style here. I do incorporate different modalities, so acupuncture and massage in my office as a couple of services you can do. But also, one thing that I'm really passionate about is getting acupuncture out to the underserved communities. And so in this last few years, I've been able to open my practice based on a style called community acupuncture, where I'm able to offer sliding scale treatments, and they're just, slightly less intensive than a private acupuncture treatment. You're sitting maybe in a room around other people, so we don't talk as much. I'll feel the pulse and ask what we're working with here, and we have a short discussion before a few points that are mostly in this style, in the community style acupuncture, is below the elbows and knees, so there's no disrobing. It makes for a better option for people that just need a little tune-up, or that are on a limited budget, don't have health insurance, and really need a new perspective.
Yeah, so I know this is a question on a lot of people's minds. So does this hurt? You're talking about putting needles in you, and I know I had kind of this conception going into acupuncture. I wasn't really sure if I would like the experience, and I can share my experience that it wasn't painful the way I thought it would be. But could you talk about, the needles when you use those, exactly how that works, so people kind of understand what they can expect?
Yeah, the first thing I do get this question, people that are needle phobic, or maybe they've had a bad experience at their physician's office. And the one thing to differentiate is that those syringes that you're most frequently poked with in your doctor's office are one hollow. I think you can fit something like 20 acupuncture needles, maybe more, inside of the tip of a syringe.
Oh, that's fascinating.
And so to note that our needles are not injecting or removing something, so we're not actually aiming for a physical structure as these what most people are thinking of with needles. That means that there's less sensory organs, there's less of the nerve fibers to then send a pain signal where we're putting a pin, and most people don't really feel it. So that's another part of the gentle approach that acupuncture can have. I often tell people who are really concerned, they wanted to try acupressure first, and acupressure can actually be more painful than acupuncture because we're stimulating that point with some pretty heavy pressure for a longer period of time, and it can get a little bit sore there, like you can imagine if somebody's really digging in on massage where you're just reaching that little discomfort point. So yeah, I mean, acupuncture is very relaxing, and most people don't feel the poke at all. So.
Well, and I was going to say, I've had different practitioners work on me, and I have to say, Sara, that you are the best in terms of it's not hurting, because I have had, sometimes the needle go in and it hurts from different practitioners. So I definitely think there's an art to the practitioner that knows just how to put that needle in. And like, wow, I remember when I went to you, I was like, gosh, I'm not even feeling it. And I often fall asleep on the table. So for people who are concerned about it, it is so relaxing. It's like a treatment. Yes.
Yeah.
And for myself, I was one of those people who, I wasn't exactly needle phobic, but I grew up getting allergy shots when I was younger. And so I just had this kind of aversion of needles because I thought, I just had this attitude like, I got poked enough when I was a kid growing up. I didn't really want to get poked more. But, just even looking at the acupuncture needles, if you ever have a chance to see them, they're very, very small. And like you said, they're not hollow, so you're not trying to inject anything into the body. So that was definitely something that, I guess was a relief to me, but, definitely something that I would say I think you have a very good skill with the needles too, just in terms of the delivery. So I was wanting to talk about this idea of breath of nature, because in Chinese medicine, there's this idea of breath of nature, which is like this natural expansion and contraction, and how all that works with the energy of the body.
Oh yeah, thanks, Patrick. That kind of goes back to, it absolutely goes back to our discussion of yin and yang, and we're observing the environmental climatic changes, and so the breath of nature is that interplay between all of these systems that they have. If you I already described the symbol of the yin and yang, the Tai Chi symbol, but if you can think about the rising sun and maybe the cycles in the day where that sun is moving from the horizon to the peak of the sky and back down, all of our organ systems have a different role in that cycle. And so we want that breath of nature, that natural cycle of the movement of the sun, the warmth, the yin and yang forces in our body to be smooth, and that interplay, that dynamic that's happening that we see on a daily or on a yearly scale outside is also happening inside of our bodies between these systems. And that's where we look for physiology and pathological changes, according to that movement right there.
That's always fascinating to me because as I mentioned, I picked up the study of Tai Chi probably over 20 years ago. So I've been observing and learning about the movement of the energy in the body. Also, through my study of metaphysics, I've learned about how our thoughts actually have this whole cascading effect leading to emotions and physical responses within the body, and how a lot of diseases that we experience actually, if you start tracking back to the origin point, to the causal point, we can often pinpoint a specific thought that created a certain condition in the body that led to a certain physiological response. And so, it's really interesting when you're talking about this whole interaction. And we even had Teresa Padilla on last week. She was talking about the energetic changes in the season and how to change your food and things like that. So, all this interplay just in terms of, you were talking about the time of day and how that affects different systems of the body. I think this would be really beneficial for people to learn more about. And actually, this is our break coming up. So we do need to go ahead and pause here for just a few minutes. And we will be right back, though. And we are on with Sara Koron. And we will be back after the break. This is Spirit's Journey on Truth Frequency Radio. And we will see you on the other side. We are back from the break. If you are just joining us, this is Spirit's Journey with Patrick and Kathryn Andries. We are coming to you on Truth Frequency Radio and being simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio, among others. We are here today with Sara Koron. And so, welcome back. We are in the spring season now. We just had the spring equinox. And so, what is the significance of the spring equinox based on the Chinese cosmology?
Yeah, one thing I always love to argue with folks is spring equinox is not actually the beginning of spring. That spring equinox is more about the peak of spring. So we're approaching summer here. And that the Lunar New Year, the Chinese New Year, signifies the beginning of spring. One of the reasons that Chinese cosmology goes through a little different definition than maybe we think of is that this is an energetic occurrence. That the beginning of spring is actually when things are happening under the surface. We're getting the mountain streams are starting to flow, and maybe more clouds. So when the ice and the snow are melting and plants are starting to germinate, there's things happening. The animals are starting to begin, if they're migratory or if they've been resting, they're starting to come back out. So spring equinox being then the peak of spring is something that I always like to talk about. It's a time when we're really starting to see things flourish after the beginning of spring, when the energetic cycle begins.
And so, Sara, is it true? I mean, I've experienced this myself when I worked in schools. I see a lot of people getting sick, the change of seasons, the entering of fall, the beginning of winter, and even at springtime. This is when the big COVID virus really peaked in spring. So why is it during these changes that people seem to come down with illnesses?
Yeah, it's hard. Transitions, as we all know, adapting to changes is tough, and so our physical system, it has a hard time with that. And partly due to our modern lifestyle, we're not exposed to the elements. We're not spending as much time outside in nature, so that these changes can be a little bit more shocking for the system, and that'll wear us down. And basically, if we get stressed, if we get worn down, that leaves an entry for a pathogen or imbalance to make its way into where we don't feel so good.
Interesting. Yeah. And going along, about the pathogen. So, in Western theory, we have the germ theory versus the terrain. In other words, the terrain theory was that if your body got into a weakened state, it was more susceptible to the virus or the bacteria, doing some damage. Whereas the germ theory would say it's the germ that makes you sick. It has nothing to do with the state of your body. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious what the Chinese take is it the germ or is it the terrain of the body that determines sickness or health?
Yeah, again, that's a very young occurrence when we get cold. This energetic factors of a pathogen from the climate, which might be the common cold, are finding places that are weakened, and that is where they enter on the surface, and we get those tight muscles, chills, a little sneezing or runny nose, headache. Those are common cold symptoms, which if our surface, if our channels and our tissues are all nourished, then the theory is that then we're more resilient to these pathogens because we're keeping a firm boundary. We're not giving access. Now, in an epidemic situation, that's a different thing. It's not the same as the climatic factors that happen normally during seasonal changes when we get a cold. It's actually a material pathogen which will present symptoms to anybody that's infected. So that's something that it has been differentiated for thousands of years through Chinese medicine classical textbooks. And I have a couple of quotes here that I think are interesting. There's one that says, "Epidemics are the contraction of the contagious qi of heaven and earth. This way the qi comes is irregardless of young or old age. Everybody who comes in contact falls ill, for evils enter through the nose or mouth." I thought that was interesting with what we're looking at now. Another one says, "When the 5 epidemics climax, all are easily contaminated. Regardless of young or old age, the disease signs will be similar." So even 3,000 years ago, the Chinese medicine doctors were aware that there was a difference between, the flu or these more viral epidemics versus the common cold and allergies and things that kind of fall into that category of more mild illnesses. So
And so, but with that, so everybody, who's susceptible will show the symptoms. But as we're seeing right now, certain people, it's like, oh, they have some sniffles. Some people don't even know they have it and they get over it. Whereas other people, elderly who have diseases, are sometimes dying of it. So I still think doesn't that bring the terrain back that certain people are getting over it quickly, others not so quickly.
it does. And it's, I do believe there's a factor of our individual constitutions as far as how we're handling, how our bodies are able to handle this, what we would call an invasion, pathogenic invasion on our bodies, and the types of symptoms that we're developing are different in this case. So yeah, it's interesting that if we can keep our immune system strong, if we don't have underlying conditions, then it seems like we're more protected. I think, there's a lot of theories out there right now on this, what's going on with the current pandemic we're dealing with.
So we do know that there's a lot of people who are handling this whole situation a lot better. So what are some prevention things that we can do and things that we can do to just promote better wellness in our bodies and our immune system?
Yeah, the first thing that I feel like is important is our nutrition. And I've personally been doing nutritional supplements as well as just focusing on the best quality of food that I can get. So looking for immune boosting nutrients through our food sources, which are going to be the best, most integrated into our systems, most useful for us is through our foods. That includes vitamin C, of course, all of your fresh fruits and vegetables, the broccoli, Brussels sprouts, kale, acerola cherries, and rose hips are kind of superstars in that category. We've got vitamin D, a little bit harder to get through food sources besides meat. The cold water fishes, cod liver oil, our butter and eggs are high in vitamin D. Also, some mushrooms have some vitamin D content that can really benefit us right now. And magnesium, zinc, and selenium also super important in our immune health. So keeping the magnesium levels through our dark leafy greens. We've got avocados, bananas, a lot of the legumes and seeds and nuts are going to be helpful. And that's true with the zinc as well. A lot of our sprouted grains and legumes, pumpkin and sunflower seeds are all helping us get zinc in our diets. And selenium through our grains, and it's also available in garlic, mushrooms, and asparagus. Another superstar food is Brazil nuts for selenium. So that's my list that I've been giving out to all of my clients, wanting them to stay well right now, is just to focus on healthy foods, to also focus on keeping the body and the spirit healthy. We need to get in good exercise. Don't overexert, but getting that fresh air, getting a walk in, getting some stretching in, things that we would normally do, only using a little bit more caution with where we're doing them. So that's important with exercise right now. And for the spirit, to really focus on stress reducing activities like meditation, journaling, just keeping our minds from getting out of control with worry or fear right now, because that's not going to be beneficial for our immune system.
Well, and one of the things that was interesting when you listed all those foods, I mean, you must have listed at least 20 or 25. And I can think of a lot of people whose diet maybe revolves around 8 foods. Whereas in the Chinese diet, we studied a little bit of the food therapy. And one of the things our friend taught was when you're doing a stir fry, you don't just put peas and carrots in there. You get like 18 or more different ingredients. And that's something that I really appreciate about the Chinese diet, is just the variety of food that in the American, SAD, standard American diet, often is just potatoes and chicken and beans, just the same things over and over. So I think it's great to emphasize the variety is so important.
Yes, it is. And, and if we go into the Chinese medicine system again, we're looking at the 5 different flavors. You can also think about the colors of your food, but we're all about a balance of these different flavors, different types of foods, and moderation as far as certain foods that we don't want to get too much, especially right now. Being the spring season, we want to avoid more of the heavier meats. We use a lot of sweet and pungent flavors. So we've got our are good pungent spices, the ginger and garlic and pepper, list goes on there. Along with a small amount of sweet, which actually a lot of the grains are considered sweet. We're not talking about corn syrup here. So it's a
Right,
gentle sweetness that is good for us in spring, focusing on, the younger plants, microgreens, fresh greens, and simple preparation of foods. So steaming foods, maybe a little bit of some soups, but nothing too greasy or heavy like that would be good right now.
So I have shared earlier that I have moved to a more whole food, plant-based diet since the beginning of the year, have really been enjoying it. I was wondering if moving away from the meats would leave me feeling hungry or weak. And so I had been doing a lot of research kind of leading up to it, and found a lot of people, especially like peak performing athletes, who are saying that they went to this whole food plant-based approach and found they had a lot more energy. They didn't get real heavy like when they were eating a lot of meats. So is there any kind of a philosophy or tradition in the Chinese system that would favor a plant-based diet over, well, especially the amount of meat that we eat here? I know in the United States, the average person probably eats maybe at least twice as much meat as what anybody would need. But just in general, in terms of including things like the beef and the chicken and stuff like that into your diet, are there any kind of thoughts on that in the Chinese health system?
There's a lot of we would say tonifying their foods, and so if somebody is needing the animal products in general, if we're talking herbs or food, they're a higher level. So to explain that is like a lot of the Chinese medicine prescriptions of meat or suggestions of meat are based on, very small 2-3 ounce portion. And we in the United States don't really get those servings. We cook a whole steak and we want the bigger burger, and so again, we go back to moderation of those foods. And if somebody were severely depleted, post surgery or chronic illness, then we might need to add in more animal products to help nourish and rebuild some of the system. But in general, if you're getting a balanced diet and you're looking at increasing these sources like the variety of legumes, seeds, nuts, and greens, of course, then you're covering the bases on a vegetarian diet, I feel.
And it reminds me of the China study. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but one of the things they found in that was when a person ate a certain amount of animal protein, if it got beyond a certain level, it actually kicked in some genes that could cause things like cancer. Whereas if you kept the animal protein level below a certain point, those genes would not kick in. Are you familiar with that study?
A little bit. I can't quote for sure, but yeah, that makes sense. And there's all sorts of examples of moderation that works. It's like red wine for heart health. We're not advocating that people go get crazy wild drunk or anything, but if you're going to have 2 ounces of alcohol, you can be really tonifying. If you're going to go over that, you're going to initiate an inflammatory response. So we're trying to keep moderation in mind to keep from going over that threshold.
And did you say that amount was 2 ounces that was recommended?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's actually less than most wine glasses would hold.
I think it might go up to 4. I think I say 2 to 4 ounces is acceptable if someone asks me about alcohol intake. But yeah, if we're working with an anti-inflammatory diet goal, we wouldn't drink a whole glass of wine.
That would be about half a glass of wine then.
Mm-hmm, correct.
That's really good, because I've heard that idea before that red wine is good for you, but then I've never really heard an actual amount. And so people, I think, use that excuse. to just, share an entire bottle of red wine, and they say, oh yeah, this is healthy for me. So that's good to know.
Yep, not if you get over 4 ounces, you start to initiate the inflammatory response. So we want to keep that balance there. And, the other thing that goes into all of these thoughts talking about food is what sorts of contaminants and what other sorts of chemicals are getting into our food supply these days. Most wines have sulfites, and a lot of people are more sensitive to that. A lot of the meats and things, animal products out there have added antibiotics or hormones that our systems aren't used to. We're not going to react well to that.
Right, our system is not used to digesting things like glyphosate, which apparently is sprayed heavily on the grapes, and so they're finding huge amounts of glyphosate in wines, depending on the region and the country. So unfortunately, wine now has been tainted.
Yeah. What made us smarter and stronger and faster at production didn't always come out in a long-term picture. We want to think 60 years ahead when we make these choices, in my opinion, not
right.
just 6 months of what's our end of year income going to look like.
Yeah, that's in line with some of the Native American traditions where they would think ahead 7 generations in terms of the changes that they made. How would that impact? And when you were talking about the amount of meat that we just give an idea of, we have a friend from China, and one time when we were eating, she was saying, each of us had like this fillet of chicken, and she said in what would be typical in China is that the entire family would have a fillet that like one of us would be eating, and it would all be split up among the family. So when they're eating animal products, they're really eating much, much smaller amounts than we are used to.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting.
And I think possibly, depending on what region you're in, it's going to be a cleaner source as well.
Sure.
Because in Chinese medicine, there's prescriptions for organ meats. If a certain organ is struggling, you might supplement it then with eating more liver, or all of the organs were considered edible. And so with proper preparation and proper, I guess, agriculture or raising these animals, then it was okay to do when these formulas were coming about. So I mean, now if we really need those substances, there's a great company, Standard Process, that is using desiccated organs that have been dried out and then capsulized, so you can get those cells in your body without actually consuming. And
yeah, I think I'll take that route. I'm not a big fan of
I agree.
organs. Just the thought of it, I was gagging. I'm sorry, but
sorry about that, vegetarian.
So let's we're getting towards the end of the hour, Sarah, and I want to talk a little about the spiritual aspect of Qigong and spiritual cultivation. I think there's the Jin Qi Shen cycle. I wonder if you could elaborate on that.
Yeah. So, back to what the importance of classical Chinese medicine and how we, use all in the whole person of integrating the mind, body, and spirit into treatment. One of the theories is that our goal is nourishing life. We're trying to maximize our physiological functions through this process of cultivation, and that's cultivating the qi in the body and the Jing Qi Shen cycle, which I think I was talking about, bringing up that Jing is what our inherited goo, like the oil in the lamp, our reserves. But this transformation happens through personal cultivation, where that essence, that thicker substance in the body, physiological substance, is then transformed into qi, which is our warming force and our energy, or also translated as our breath, which is then transformed farther. We could say that we're going from a degree of material to less material, and into Shen. And Shen is our spirit, our consciousness. It really is, in my opinion, that greater thing, what connects all of us as a universal being or organ, you could say, all of us humans. And so Jing Qi Shen is the goal of cultivation through spiritual practice that comes through Qigong, where Qigong is a type of meditative movement in the martial arts system. And so we're using visualization, and we're using our breath, and we're using movements to connect us more into that universal flow, to then, attain this higher level of being in our world, in our bodies. And so that's my instructor from Qigong says, Qigong training focuses on strengthening the Jing and transforming it to Qi, and strengthening the Qi to nourish the Shen. And the practitioner learns to work with and release disease by using the vital energy to release pathogenic factors. So again, that goes into what we need to all keep in mind right now in strengthening and evolving into stronger, more holistic human beings.
So there's probably a lot of places, especially right now online, where they can learn how to do Qigong or Tai Chi. Are you offering any kind of online classes right now, or do you have any suggestions where they could learn more about Qigong?
I don't have any offhand. I'm considering. I don't know if the radio here would be a great way, because there's so many of these visual cues that are helpful. But if you're on Facebook, you can go like my page over there, and I'm definitely looking for good quality resources for that right now, and may even do a little bit of Facebook Live videos, stream out there some exercises for people. But keep in mind that I consider Qigong is anything where we really put our concentration into developing a skill and a craft, and that can go into the arts. It can be our music creating, if you play an instrument. It can be painting, writing. There's all different ways that this cultivation is happening. Anytime that you're in prayer, or you're really concentrating on something that is passed down to you and being skillful, you're building a cycle.
All right. Well, we are at the top of the hour, so that means our show is coming to a close, but that doesn't mean that we have to lose touch with you. And so you can connect with Sara at sunriseacupuncturestudio.com. Again, that's www.sunriseacupuncturestudio.com. And also, you can connect with us on Facebook at Spirits Journey Radio. Be sure to like our page. And also, if you missed any of the great information, you can go to tfrlive.com or onenesstalkradio.com and listen to our archives on demand. This has been Spirits Journey. I'm Patrick.
And I'm Kathryn. Thanks for joining us. We'll catch you next Saturday.
Goodbye for now.